Rare zebra's milk he had been swirling idly in his glass. The exotic milk, and others like it, was a demon's alcohol. It was proof that though nightwalkers greatly resembled humans, usually very handsome and appreciable ones, there were distinct differences in their chemistries and physiologies. These distinctive differences would set them apart as supernatural beings to the common eye, should they decide to flaunt them. But the nightwalkers used great care here. Human beings could become overzealous at even the smallest hint of myth or mystery. It was in their nature to fear that which was more powerful than themselves, a failing that would not change until they matured as a species. Regardless of the fact that he himself boasted unusually riveting features, the vampire was struck, as he always was, with the drilling effect of the demon's molten mercury eyes. Gideon's facial appearance, agelessly aristocratic, showed nothing of his having existed for more than a millennium, but those eyes most certainly did. Since demons also tended toward a swarthy complexion, looking perpetually tanned, it magnified the startling effect of Gideon's gaze. The ancient demon also had hair of incredibly pristine silver, long enough to touch his collarbone and tied back with a thin strip of tanned leather. In humans, this coloring would be a sign of age, but the vampire knew Gideon had been born with his hair color, and in spite of it would never look a day over the age of 35, perhaps a little closer to 40 when one took those aged eyes into account.
If you have felt slighted in any way, Damien, I extend my apologies,
the demon said with distant manners, his rich voice filling the echoing places of the large room. Damien dismissed the idea with a click of his tongue and the brushing wave of an elegant, long-fingered hand.
We are creatures of the ages, Gideon. We have long since learned to not feel slighted when one or the other of us goes into seclusion, for whatever reason.
Damien's indigo eyes narrowed on the demon seated across from him.
But I admit that I am curious as to the motivation for your visit after all this time. I am afraid it is not as social as I might have wished it to be,
Gideon said.
I am here to serve you warning.
Warn me? Damien cocked a gracefully arched brow at the demon.
Yes, as the most ancient of my race to the most ancient of yours.
Damien acknowledged the reverence of Gideon's distinction with a graceful inclination of his head.
Despite the vast differences in our races, Gideon, you and I have always found much in common with one another. And it is a commonality that brings me to your door now. A common enemy.
This revelation made the vampire's spine straighten with sudden tension.
Necromancers.
It wasn't a question. They had both been alive too long not to know what was of import to one another.
Damn,
Damien hissed, suddenly standing and pacing the floor of his cavernous parlor.
I should have known. I should have sensed something was amiss. How do you see that?
Gideon asked, one brow lifting inquisitively.
Gerard has gone missing. I had thought he might have just gone to ground, as my people do from time to time, but Gerard had just roused from a century-long sleep, so I thought it odd he would return so quickly. It is still possible that is all that has happened. Possible,
the vampire agreed.
But he is not the only one to go missing, and you know as well as I do that it is unlikely to be coincidence. Have you any idea how many we are to contend with this time?
The ancient vampire stilled his stride, his hands curling into fists and his fierce eyes flaring with his obvious contempt for the odious human magic users who had plagued the Nightwalker races for centuries.
How foolish I was to hope that since there had been no necromancers for this last century, we had seen the last of them. It is embarrassing to my intelligence to speak of it even now. You have been no more or less foolish than the rest of us,
Gideon said darkly.
I am the most ridiculous of them all.
The demon was silent for a long heartbeat, and Damien's supernatural senses hummed sharply with subconscious awareness of the demon's disturbed thoughts. Out of respect, however, Damien would never think of scanning Gideon in order to obtain those thoughts.
Along with the return of these necromancers,
Gideon continued, his perfectly pitched voice as even and unaffected by emotions as ever,
we have discovered that druids are yet in existence. Druids?